of the Pensions Committee and Pensions Board today on the 21st of September. In accordance with Section 43 of the Local Government in Scotland 2003, I have directed that this meeting will be conducted in such a manner as to allow remote attendance by elected members. The meeting will also be live streamed at www.falkirk.gov.live, where the public can view the proceedings. Before the business starts, can I ask you to mute on Teams unless you wish to speak? This ensures that there's no background noise will be carried, even though we've got the issue today, but I'm sure the proceedings will work okay. So I'm now going to formally open the meeting. Apologies. Do we have any apologies, Mr. Peary?
No, there's no apologies received from today's meeting, convener.
Thank you. Now, number 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Members should declare financial and non-financial interest.
Apologies, convener. There's
quite a big echo. Business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of interest.
Tony's got his hand up.
Mr. Cleary, do you wish to speak?
I did, thank you. I just didn't quite manage to get engaged just before you moved on. Apologies from Andy Douglas. He can't make it this morning. He's attending a funeral.
Sorry, could you just repeat that, please?
Apologies for Andy Douglas, because he can't make it this morning because he's attending a funeral.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Steinbanks mentioned there's echo. I think there's nothing we can do about that, unfortunately. Is it bearable?
Just about. I'm not sure if anybody else is experiencing it, though.
Yeah.
The sound's pretty bad.
I don't know, Brian, if maybe you've got the sound in the room kicked in now as well as on your laptop. Maybe that's causing the echo.
No, I'm not sure it's that. We did. That's what we did. It's not. So we're just wondering if there's a technical issue we can fix. If we can see if it's bearable just now, we'll try and resolve while the committee is going on, if that's okay.
So carry on with business. Next on the agenda is the minutes. And please note there's 2 minutes to have a look at. I'll just give you a wee while just to look them over if you haven't already looked them over. Do we have any comments on the minutes? No? All agreed? Agreed, thank you. Next on the agenda is general governance matters, and that's going to be taken by Catherine Crothers.
So we start with the National Care Service. This has been a standing item which was added to ensure that developments in this area and the potential impact it could have on the fund were considered by the Pensions Committee and Board. However, since being added, in July, an agreement was reached between the Scottish Government, local government and the NHS, which sees the overall accountability for the National Care Service shared between these organisations. The staff will continue to be employed by local authorities, and councils will continue to be responsible for assets like buildings and the delivery of services. The result of these actions means that there will be no significant impact to the fund resulting from the formation of the National Care Service. But should this change, then the committee and board will be updated. The Money and Pensions Service, I'll refer to it as MAPS, is an organisation that is funded by the DWP and provides free and impartial money and pensions guidance. In certain circumstances, the pensions section will direct members of the fund to this organisation for guidance, which is why this is on the agenda, because in its annual corporate plan, which was published in August, The map set out the organisation's plan to commence work on a new delivery model for all of its guidance services. This review will include pensions guidance and pensions wise, and it's actually pensions wise which under certain circumstances the fund will direct members. So the pensions section will continue to monitor the developments with this organisation and implement any changes that could impact members of the fund. The next affects one of our employers, participating employers, which is the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. As many of you will remember, back in the day it used to be 8 different organisations, and then they came together to form the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. When that merger happened, the pensions remained in the 8 regional locations. Now that's become difficult for Scottish Fire and Rescue to manage, and they've chosen to consolidate into one fund. We currently look after 21 of their active members, 9 deferred members and 13 pensioners. We do not propose to participate in the bid that will see the administration come to our fund. And in consequence, we would expect the assets for this employer to move to its new provider by the 31st of May 2024. We do not see this having a significant impact on either the assets or the operations of the fund. The fund has 2 employers who have stopped their active membership in the fund. These employers were in surplus on the day they exited the fund, and in line with the local government pension scheme regulations, an exit credit must be calculated and it must be paid. There is no discretion over this. The amount of the exit credit that is paid is determined by the actuary, and as the fund must look to protect the interests of other ongoing employers, the actuary has adopted an approach which, as far as is reasonably practicable, protects the other employers from the likelihood of any material loss emerging in the future. A payment of 1.3 million was paid to one employer, and the payment to the other employer has yet to take place, but we are expecting it to be in excess of £10 million. Standard Life is one of the fund's additional voluntary contribution providers, and about 5 years ago it became part of the Phoenix Group. And the Phoenix Group are looking to rebrand that organisation to Phoenix Life Limited in October this year. That move is subject to court approval, but as with when Equitable Life moved to Utmost, we won't and we should not see any change to our daily operations, because the people who are sitting at the desks now processing the AVCs and all the work that we put their way will be exactly the same people in exactly the same offices once the transfer happens. So there should again be no impact to members or the fund. The Economic Activity of Public Bodies Overseas Matters Bill seeks to remove the possibility of public bodies in the UK, including local government pension scheme funds, from seeking to divest from, campaign against, boycott or sanction a particular territory internationally unless endorsed by the government's own policy. And an example of that would be the current boycott and sanctions that are against Russia. This bill is a thorny matter, to put not too fine a point on it, and is something that is of long-standing in nature, has been subject to legal challenge in the past, and looks set to be equally controversial this time around, with the Scheme Advisory Board in England and Wales, along with the Vice Chair of the board, John Richards, and Local Government Association's Head of Pensions, Joe Donnelly, providing evidence to the Public Bill Committee on the bill's effect on pensions. As the proposed bill will affect Scottish local government pension funds, the pensions section will monitor developments and implement any changes that could impact the fund. The UK Pensions Dashboard Programme is a regular on this report, and for those who are unaware, the Pensions Dashboard Programme aims to provide a digital platform which will enable people to access information about all of their pension savings, including their state pension, in one place. The original staging date for our pension fund was the 30th of September 2024, but the DWP has since revised the staging date and the staging timetable for all pension arrangements, which means that the fund must stage no later than the 31st of October 2026. While the fund has made good progress towards being dashboard ready, we would expect that we will onboard after the 30th of September 2024. The next item is one that has caused a lot of confusion, which is the cost transparency training. This is occurring in face-to-face this morning, I do believe, at 11 o'clock. It was originally planned to be hybrid, which is why our meeting was brought forward to enable people to dial in. But the online version is now being held on the 28th of September, so a week today. If anybody wants to attend the online and hasn't already registered or doesn't have the contact details, if you contact me, I will put you in the direction of the correct person. The last item is the Local Government Pension Scheme Governance Conference 2024, which will be held in York on the 18th and 19th of January 2024. Please let me know if you wish to attend.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm now going to open it up for any questions from our members. I see Councillor Steinbank's got his hand up. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. And it's just on the point of the overseas bill that's coming through, 8.3, and the risk that pension funds might be subject to a judicial review. Is that, just to clarify, is it judicial review purely within the scope of the provisions of this bill, or is this putting in a new right to third parties to request a judicial review for a broader realm of purposes from third parties?
It is new. So currently it's quite difficult to require a judicial review, particularly with regard to investments. So this is a development that's kind of unwelcome because the court process is already at its capacity and this could gum up the works. And at the moment, pension funds operate on fiduciary duty, what is best for the members. So part of the reason this is controversial is because we don't feel it's applicable for local government pension scheme funds. And that's because we actually don't boycott or sanction unless we're directed to by the government, for example, Russia.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. That was a very clear explanation on it. So in terms of the actual third parties that might have an interest, I know that it says within the papers that that's quite vague at the moment, but in terms of the realistic risk, who would those third parties be of a judicial review getting brought forward?
I think that's the million-dollar question, to be honest, Councillor Steinbank. We actually don't know who those third parties can be. They just have to be sufficiently. What does sufficiently mean? You know, we just don't know, and that is part of the problem, trying to pin that down.
Thanks for that. My next question is just on 9.4 on the pensions dashboard. I'm just looking to what the nature of the complex cases that are leading to the staging date being after the 30th of September 2024, just to the general nature of the complexities and why that means that the staging date will be delayed. Thanks.
So some of the cases we have are where we have to go back to employers to try and find out additional information that will enable us to close down the cases. Some of these are where we're going to have to work with the employer to come up with a best estimate. We also have the complexity of McLeod. The regulations for McLeod were actually issued yesterday and come into force in 9 days' time. So we have to get that implemented as well. And we need to get that implemented. So that's crossing over with our ability to get ourselves completely dashboard ready, because we have to be ready to implement the McLeod changes for annual benefit statements by August next year. So that's taking a precedent.
Thanks, Catherine. Thank you, convener. No more further questions.
Thank you. Any more questions? No? So I'm now going to move on to recommendations. The Pensions Committee and Board are invited to note the contents of this report. The Pensions Committee and Board are asked to confirm that item 3, National Care Service, be removed as a standing item on the General Governance Matters report. Do we agree?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. I'm now going to move on to agenda item investment review, and that is welcome Stuart Petrovich. I'll let you go ahead now. Thank you.
Thank you, convener, and very well pronounced, I have to say. I hear very many different versions of my surname, but that was very impressive. Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm going to be covering the investment review today. As you may or may not be aware, Albert Chen is actually speaking at the cost transparency session that was mentioned earlier. Okay, so in terms of the investment review, I guess you'll touch on the recommendations again at the end, but committee and board are asked to note the recent investment market developments, the fund's strategic allocation, the fund's performance for the period ending the 30th of June 23, and also the investment monitoring activity of the GISP. So at section 3, we cover the market review and outlook. This comments on the inflationary backdrop and central banks' attempts to use monetary policy to control inflation in as measured a way as possible so as not to cause significant economic deterioration or indeed ultimately potential recession. Reasonably topical, the Fed actually announced yesterday that they were holding interest rates steady, but they also signalled that rates may yet need to rise further and will stay higher for longer. That said, at present, it does appear that the Fed are managing to successfully gradually tame inflation, while signs are that they will manage to avoid recession. Like I suggested, this is a global phenomenon, and the Bank of England will announce their decision on rates at lunchtime today. This is quite finely balanced, with investment markets suggesting it's now 50-50 whether they hike rates further or hold them steady. And that comes after an inflation print that you might have seen yesterday that showed actually that recent inflation was lower than the market had expected. In terms of asset markets, global equity markets rose by just over 3% in sterling terms in the quarter to the end of June, and those gains were even stronger in US dollar terms. The equity market gains were driven in the main by US large cap technology stocks, and that's been the case for 2023 as a whole, though these stocks do look increasingly expensive in terms of various valuation metrics. In the quarter, UK gilts fell in reaction to the Bank of England rate rise. Section 4 covers investment strategy. As I'm sure you're all very aware, the fund is currently in the midst of reviewing investment strategy, with Hymans Robertson hosting a joint training event that I'm sure the majority of you were at last Friday. Table 1 in item 4.4 shows the current strategy and permitted ranges, while Table 2 in item 4.5 looks at the quarterly changes in asset allocation over the 12 months to the end of June. The main changes have been the increase in real assets, reduction in equities, an increase in LDI, or more specifically gilts. The fund has been operating comfortably within the permitted ranges over the period shown. Table 3 in item 4.6 shows a more up-to-date position at the 11th of August, where the major difference is the move to a modest underweight position in equities. Section 5 covers fund returns. Over the second quarter, the fund was broadly unchanged, falling 0.5% against a benchmark change of -0.9%. Longer term data shows the fund has gained 7.4% per annum since September 2001, which compares favourably to a benchmark return of 6.3% per annum over the same period. And similarly, 5-year fund returns of +6% per annum is ahead of benchmark return of +2.9% per annum over that 5-year period. A more detailed breakdown of manager returns is shown in Appendix 1. Items 5.5 and 5.6 touch on the funding level, which obviously looks at the change in assets as well as the change in liabilities, but the ongoing work with Hymans in terms of the investment strategy review will provide or has provided more detail on this. The appendices contain details of underlying performance, private market commitments, and mandate benchmarks and objectives, but I don't plan to particularly say anything in addition to the content that you see there. So with that, unless Amanda has anything that she would like to add, I'm happy to open up to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Petrovich. Amanda, do you wish to add anything to this?
Thanks, convener. No, I don't really have anything to add. I suppose there's a few things I'll pick up as part of the GIST paper towards the end of the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm now going to open it up for members. Does any members have any questions or comments on this investment review? I don't see any hands up. So will we just move on? Oh, sorry. Mr. Murphy.
Yeah, just a very quick question. I suppose on the formal valuation, the triennial valuation, is there timelines around when we're likely to have the figures, the report from Hymans on that?
So, I mean, apologies, I'll take that, and Amanda, feel free to chip in. In terms of, so discussions have been ongoing with Hymans Robertson. Hymans Robertson did attend the most recent joint investment strategy panel meeting, which obviously there were representatives from each of the funds, because we're doing this on a joint basis, as well as the independent advisors. And subsequent to that, there was the training event last week. In terms of expectations as to what happens next, I think there will be further interaction between Hymans, Robertson and fund officers. I think that is potentially going to take place, Albert suggested November, but there will likely be interaction in the interim period. And the expectation is that ultimately a proposal would come to committees in December, is I think currently the expectation.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you both. Any further questions? No? We'll move on to the recommendations then. The committee and board are asked to note 1, recent investment market developments, 2, the fund's strategic allocation, 3, the fund's performance for the period ending 30th of June 23, and 4, the investment monitoring activity of the Joint Investment Strategy Board. Oh. Thank you. So we're going to move on to engagement and voting activity on the agenda, and that's going to be taken by Catherine Carruthers.
Okay, so the fund uses a dedicated engagement specialist called Hermes EOS, who were appointed for a 4-year term that started on the 1st of October 2021. Hermes provides 3 reports each quarter: a voting report, which shows the number of votable meetings that were held during the quarter and an overview of how the votes were cast; an engagement report showing the split of engagements that they've had with the companies in our portfolio by region and theme; and a public engagement report commenting on the engagements Hermes have undertaken. These reports can be found on SharePoint and set out the work Hermes have undertaken during Q2 of this year. There is also a highlights report which has been uploaded to the SharePoint portal that spotlights the engagement work Hermes undertakes, and the committee and board are asked to treat these reports as confidential. Over the last quarter, Hermes has engaged with 99 companies held in the fund's portfolio on a range of 359 environmental, social and governance issues and objectives. They've also made voting recommendations at 208 votable meetings, recommending opposing one or more resolutions at 141 meetings, voting with management by exception at 17 meetings, and supporting management on all resolutions at the remaining 50 meetings. Further reports, such as the environmental social governance reports from Schroeder, Newton and Legal General, have been uploaded to the SharePoint portal as well.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm now going to open it up to members. Do we have any questions on the engagement and voting activity report? I don't see any hands up. I've got a question, Catherine. I understand the rationale for Herm's preference to work patiently and in private, using a professional approach with companies. However, if no progress is made during the extended period, considering matters like climate change, which is accelerating, for example, just look at this year's heat waves all over the world, knowing we have to meet our climate change goals too, what time frame do they give in this extended time frame before other action is considered?
So I haven't been informed of what that time frame would be, but I do also believe it is likely to be subjective depending on the interaction with each particular company that they engage with. So as I highlighted earlier, there have been 208 votable meetings, and at 141 they have opposed one or more resolutions. So we are seeing action being taken against resolutions which are not in the interests of the fund. But as to what further sanctions could be and when that would happen, I think would be dependent on the actual engagement manager's view of how the engagement was going and whether that was required. So I don't think there would be a hard and fast time, but it would be subject to continuous review and assessment by the engagement manager.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine, for that answer. I've got Mr. Petrovich again. Would you like to come in and add something to that question?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. And yeah, no, I would echo what Catherine said there. I think I would just make the additional comment that ultimately Hermes, EOS are involved in the engagement, but the ultimate decision as to, if any engagement is not happening in a timeline or things are not progressing in the manner that might be expected, then ultimately it comes down to the manager of the underlying assets, or the person that's responsible for managing that portfolio that owns these shares, to then decide, well, that is of such significance that we would no longer want to own. And it's just to add that additional context. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Petrovich. That gives a little bit greater understanding there what happens in the process. No further questions? If so, I'm going to go to recommendations. The Pensions Committee and Board are invited to note and comment on the contents of the report and the reports provided by Hermes EOS. Thank you. And we're just going to have a break for 5 minutes because agenda item 7 is exclusion of the public. Do you want me to?
Perhaps, Convener, if we could just agree to exclude the public, so that'll give us time to switch the live stream off. The live stream is working and sounds fine on that. there's no issues there. But if you give us 5 minutes to
5
switch the
minutes.
live stream off, we can see if we can still sort the sound as well.
Thank you.